You know, I've been arguing with religious extremists virtually every day of the last quarter century or so. And that is just as maddening as it sounds. Usually, the ones I deal with are creationists. What does that mean? Just because you're a Christian or Muslim doesn't necessarily mean that you're a creationist. No. There are plenty of people who believe in God, but who also understand the science that contradicts the scriptures, or at least a literal interpretation of them. No, creationists may be Christian or Muslim or some other faith, but they're the people who reject evolution specifically, in whole or in part, and methodological naturalism in general, in favor of an argument from authority, usually based on some version of man-made mythology being misinterpreted as God's word. This argument from authority is the primary logical fallacy that religious fundamentalism is based on, but there's a whole lot more, like arguments from ignorance and incredulity, and especially the circular assumptions of the question-begging fallacy, which I find is ubiquitous in all religious belief. The fact that every religious faith requires logically invalid arguments is part of the reason why I can't be religious myself. That and the fact that religious clerics and apologists both have to lie as a matter of course, because faith means pretending to know things you don't know, asserting baseless speculation as if it was a matter of fact, and refusing to admit when you're wrong, no matter how often or how obviously that's been demonstrated. Believers habitually ignore important questions because they know they'll trap themselves. And whenever a mistake is pointed out, as they always are in every post, and usually multiple times in each post, the wanna pretender simply ignores the correction and keeps on repeating the same mistakes forever, or they change the subject without ever making an admission that they were wrong. They say, well, let's talk about this then. And consequently, I have to cover and correct the exact same errors with every single believer over and over again. Sometimes correcting the same guy, still repeating the same lie today that I corrected yesterday, or that 100 other people have already corrected 1,000 times over the last 10 years, just with that one person and his faith-based learning disability. None of these dishonest dumbasses have the wherewithal to accept that, oh, that's wrong? Well, I'll stop saying that then. No, they think it doesn't matter that it's wrong. It doesn't matter if they know that it's wrong. They're going to keep saying it anyway, because the goal is to make believe what they already know is not evidently true. They don't even care what the truth is. That doesn't matter to them because they believe on faith. And that's why I was happy to see Michael Behe having to defend intelligent design in a court of law, because then the witness has to answer the questions, and we'll finally get that moment of admission when they're forced to say,
I may have been mistaken.
But that doesn't happen with creationists. They simply will not ever admit any critical error, not even in a court of law, not even when they know that it's wrong and they know that everyone else knows it's wrong too. If you engage one of these cases of self-inflicted idiocy on social media, you will witness persistent, perpetual, purposeful stupidity. By the time you get a dozen posts into your discourse, you will have already heard enough of these points refuted 1,000 times that you could probably call bingo. Starting with how atheists allegedly believe that everything came from nothing. But no, we don't. I don't know any atheist alive who believes that, because we don't believe that there was ever just nothing to start with. Material energy can neither be created nor destroyed, so it wasn't. The Big Bang may have been the beginning of cosmic inflation, but not the beginning of the universe itself. Every model of cosmogony that includes a singularity has that either already existing eternally before the beginning of time, or it represents a potential midpoint from an earlier form of the universe, something like a Big Bang, Big Crunch sort of oscillation, but not necessarily that, and not as simple as that either. Either way, some aspects of the cosmos are eternal, never created. So there was no creator because there was never a creation, and there was never a time when there was just nothing. So atheists are not the ones who believe that everything came from nothing. You know who does believe that? Creationists believe that. You're the ones who believe that your God used an incantation to speak everything out of nothing. Now, some of the wanna pretenders get a little bit embarrassed about that, understandably, and they try to make up feeble excuses like, well, God didn't make everything out of nothing, he made it out of himself. Well, you got two problems with that. One is that God is nothing. Sorry, there is no God. Every God ever worshipped is entirely imaginary. I know you don't accept that because that's reality, the world that you wish you weren't a part of so that you can, be in some world of pure imagination. But you got another problem too, because you have confused the words of men for the word of God, in which you believe that God himself said that he calls into existence the things that do not exist. Can't get much more explicit than that, can you? So God did not make everything out of himself. It's just that God could supposedly wish things into being, like a genie. When we build something, we just have to start with materials. We build a car out of steel, we build a building out of bricks, and a boat out of wood or fiberglass or other things. But what things did God make everything out of? No material at all? Not a thing? No thing? Nothing. He made everything from nothing. He simply wished it into being. In other words, he imagined us, which is effectively returning the favor that we previously did for him. Don't tell me that you don't believe everything came from nothing, not when the leaders of your ridiculous movement say that you do, like the Institute for Creation Research, who admit their belief in creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. So believers are the ones who believe that everything came from nothing, not the unbelievers, me, who do not believe any such thing. Oh, but that's another problem, isn't it? The wanna pretenders have no idea what it means to not believe. They think that we believe in not, as if we're not unbelievers, but believers in un. They say that we believe in nothing, when it would be more appropriate to say that we do not believe anything on faith. I realize it's a subtle distinction, and this doesn't work for people who think in binary terms, for whom subtleties are often go over their head. If somebody claims to have met a famous person or saw an unusual event, or that they did something and none of these things seem likely, then you might not believe them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you think they're wrong or that they're lying. Maybe they are. Maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't. You're not convinced either way. If it matters, you might explore it to find out whether it's true or not. Being able to objectively weigh both hypotheses at once, considering both realistically, but not necessarily believing either one. Now this, to my experience, is something that believers can't do, or they won't do, whereas unbelievers typically do all the time. So believers think that unbelief is impossible, because everything has to be a belief. Everything has to be a positive belief, meaning something that you have to choose to believe, as if we had a choice. And then you have to convince yourself that it's true. But no, that's not how we think at all. Honest, rational people cannot choose to believe whatever we want to. We have to be compelled by evidence. And if we realize that our evidence wasn't good enough to warrant belief in the first place, you don't have to disprove that belief, because we already don't believe it ourselves anymore. The faithful have to project all their own faults onto everyone else. So they say that atheism is a religion. But no, not having theism is not having theism. You get the subtlety in there? Again, I realize that subtleties are lost on these people. The absence of religion is not a religion, and the rejection of faith is not a faith. Yet this is the most common argument I hear from absolutely every believer. All of them try to make me into a believer too. They say that I have more faith than they do because they don't know what my evidence is, and they don't want to know either. They just close their eyes and their ears and say, that doesn't prove anything, because they don't understand that science doesn't deal in proof, but by what is supported by the evidence versus whatever is not supported. And whatever is not supported doesn't warrant further discussion. They say that evolution is a religion. They'll even say that science is a religion, because they say that anything you believe, meaning anything you accept to be true, must be because of faith, not evidence. They don't have a concept of evidence changing their minds. And then the notion of faith, they immediately equivocate, such that anything you think is true is only that what you pretend to be true, because they think you got to believe everything even when you don't believe anything in the way that they do. So no, we don't have faith. The science operates exactly opposite of faith, and that's why science works and faith doesn't. Now, believers, I appreciate that you apparently realize how indefensible faith is, and that's why you try to project it onto the unbelievers. It's the tu quoque fallacy of saying, you're just as bad, or you have faith too. But no, we don't, because faith means an unreasonable assumption that is not based on reason and must be defended against all reason. We don't do that. Instead, we follow the facts and evidence, and we accept those only tentatively, only so long as they can withstand critical scrutiny, which religious faith can't tolerate at all. Yet y'all are determined to believe anyway because of an erroneous assumption of authority. Science doesn't have authorities, and we're required to question our own assumptions so as not to be fooled into believing things that are not likely true. And we don't believe anything completely like the foolish faithful do. That's how you get deceived. When I point out their falsehoods and dishonesty, they say, well, what's wrong with lying? They actually do try to justify that it's okay to lie. They phrase that in different ways. Why does it have to be true before I believe it? That sort of thing. And when I say that only accurate information has practical application, their response is the placebo effect, being the only argument they have, and that's another attempt to defend deception. The fact that faith is inherently dishonest is the reason why we reject it. This whole issue of whether we believe or not comes down to whether we care what the truth is. Do you want to find out what is really true and improve your understanding, or do you just want to make believe something else instead, even if we already know that it's not true, choosing to believe it anyway? That's what faith is and does. Earlier this week, I read a tweet accusing atheists of believing that life, the universe, and everything all began magically. No. Again, I must address and correct the believers. You're the ones who believe that everything happened and happens by magic, by which I mean supernatural miracles, because that's what magic is. We all accept that there was a point when there was no life on this planet, and then there was. We think that happened naturally, and y'all think it happened supernaturally, miraculously, magically. If you believe in the Bible, then you must believe in magic, because the Bible is full of it. Magical enchantments come in two forms. Beneficial enchantment is called a blessing, while a negative enchantment is called a curse. And beyond that, there's an incantation in Genesis 1, a golem spell in Genesis 2, an elemental spell in Leviticus 14, a potion in Numbers 5, and there's also necromancy, faith healing, forecasting, transformation, purification, weather control, water bending, and exorcism, because there's also demons and ghosts in the Bible, along with dragons and witches and wizards. There's all that in the Quran, too, but with genies as well. So yes, science-minded, rational atheists understand that there's a sequence of several chemical processes in different environments involved in the natural development of life, but it wasn't magic. Creationists believe that life was created by literal magic. Atheists don't believe that. A couple days ago, someone told me that physics proves God. Of course, they didn't provide any citation, no evidence or arguments, no reason why, because there isn't one, and they know that. So I asked them, well, if that's true, then why is it that only 7% of physicists believe in God? Why are 92% of physicists atheists? And the reply I got was the allegation that academia requires that scientists maintain their evolutionist beliefs. But no, again, that's what creationists do. If you have a science degree, but you don't want to do science, if you would rather undermine science while defending the faith, then you can go to work for Answers in Genesis. If you present a signed copy of their statement of faith, along with your own testimony promising to promote creationism regardless what the facts actually indicate, wherein you have to agree to give the sacred fables priority even when the facts prove it wrong, because their statement of faith holds that no amount of proof will ever change their minds. That's why I say that faith is the most dishonest position it is possible to have. Whereas in science, they have to test their own theories. They have to try to disprove their own hypotheses. They have to argue with each other, and they have to put everybody else through the ringer and check everyone's math to make sure they all got it right. And the best way to become rich and famous in science is by overturning the status quo. So science works exactly opposite of religious organizations. There is nothing more biased and no more dishonest than the way Answers in Genesis and ICR and other creationist organizations conduct themselves. So believers, stop pretending as if I am you. You are not me debating you. You have to play the hand you're dealt. That means you're stuck being you. And I'm not like you. Yours is the indefensible position without justification. The things you believe and the way you believe, those are all your faults, not mine. I will not share them. You're the one doing all these things you accuse us of, not me, not the unbelievers. It is religious fundamentalists who swear to dishonestly defend their deception no matter what the truth is, because you're the ones who believe on faith, where we don't and won't. Creationists are the ones who are determined to pretend as if everything was poofed out of literally nothing by magic. If you can't defend your illogical, irrational, emotional, delusional, dishonest, and deceitful position, then give it up, or at least shut up about it. Stop trying to spit your stupidity all over us.